You can judge the state of a civilization by the way it treats its prisoners. That is a quote from the great Russian novelist Dostoevsky, and as you can see from the opening news clip, the state of California does not treat even its children who have been taken into state custody well at all. These are the employees paid by your tax money organizing gladiator fights amongst children. And it makes me, let's have a flashback, because the more things change, unfortunately, the more they remain the same, as public policy problems in the United States are tending not to get solved. They're just going on for decades. Let's go back to the 1990s. Corcoran Prison. It was built in 1989 along with Pelican Bay as the twin gems of maximum security incarceration in California. But something very bad started happening as soon as it opened.
Most of the fighting and the shooting of prisoners has occurred in Corcoran's Special Security Housing Unit, the SHU, a prison within the prison that is set aside for difficult inmates, violent inmates from throughout the California prison system. Lieutenant Steve Rigg was a supervisor at Corcoran.
We've had inmates killed when it could have been avoided, and now I think it's just a cover-up.
Since Corcoran Prison opened in 1988, guards there have killed 8 inmates and wounded scores of others, more than any other prison in the country.
So there was a whistleblower guard that came out and traced some of this back to basically guards who felt that when inmates would someone jump on guards, a bunch of guards formed. It's California, so of course they're going to form a gang. They called it the Green Wall Gang. They would drink green beer. They would wear green accessory. You know how like the Bloods, they're going to have some little red. Well, they'd have a little green. These are the guards. They'd have parties where they'd drink green beer. They'd get, what's that, W, like 7 X, W, X, Y, Z. I guess W is 23, G is green, like 723 or whatever was their numbers. So very much like a gang. And they were organizing these fights between inmates. And one particular inmate, a black guy that was in prison for rape, was gunned down. So this Tate murder, because I guess it was very clear that, so what they were doing, it was a lot of Hispanic versus black inmates. Not that many black guards, though some. So it tended to be the black inmates getting shot and killed. Now, the way the guards could kind of, well, in the end, it turned out they really didn't need to cover it up because nobody was going to punish them. But if one inmate's on top of another and you shoot and you hit the wrong guy, well, you were trying to save him from the inmate on top of him. So whether the black inmate was on top of the Hispanic or the Hispanic was on top of the black inmate, you could shoot the black inmate and act like you were trying to either protect the Hispanic or save the black guy.
Why were so many inmates getting shot at Corcoran? First, the California Department of Correction is the only major prison system in the country where the guards are armed inside all the prison housing areas. And for years, its regulations called for an integrated exercise yard policy. But if you put feuding inmates, blacks and whites, Latinos, rival gang members, into small exercise yards like this one in the SHU, it's bound to lead to violence.
And if you put them on the yard together, they're going to fight, either through hatred or through peer pressure. They're going to fight.
According to both prison guards and inmates, staged battles, gladiator fights, complete with betting, became a regular entertainment at Corcoran. Matches were set up by selecting inmates from rival gangs, from a SHU cell block like this one, and then releasing them one by one into the SHU yard. At least one Corcoran supervisor reportedly amused himself by calling the fights like a ring announcer.
And that's where most of the shootings took place also.
Officer Richard Caruso worked at Corcoran with Lieutenant Steve Rigg.
My superiors sometimes called down to the control booth and asked, "Are you going to have a yard fight?" And the staff told them, "Yes, we are." And they were told, the staff were told, "Hold the yard up. I have a new secretary that just got on board here at Corcoran. I want to bring her down and show her the Corcoran way." And when they brought her into the control booth to show off the fighting, the gunner was told to let him fight a little bit for she can basically get impressed.
In 1995, Officer Caruso and Lieutenant Rigg, after being rebuffed by their prison warden and by superiors in Sacramento, decided to go to the FBI.
So several guards, like the story says, went to the FBI as whistleblowers, and you would think that, you know, I mean, if you have guards telling, and there was in the prison guard culture, there's a no snitching thing. It's you take people out of the criminal world, right? And you put them in prison. But if prison is a continuation, almost in exactly of the criminal lifestyle they came from, you know, it's ruled by gangs, drugs are available, the guards, you know, if you're a guard and you see another guard do something wrong, you should be reporting it to your superior, but then you're called a snitch. Guards would have fights. This is well known. This isn't just at Corcoran. This thing that happened at Corcoran just happened to be particularly egregious, and there were some whistleblowers, and like it said, the Corcoran prison had the most inmates killed by guards of any prison. It wasn't inmates killing inmates, it was guards killing them. So it made it to the national stage, but I've been told many times by prison guards, police, of fighting, you know, after work. Oh, you told the supervisor about me? We're gonna fight in the parking lot.
Trying to put a stop to what they considered the guards' barbaric acts. One such incident involved inmate Preston Tate. He was in prison for rape, and in the shoe for allegedly attacking a guard. In April of 1994, Tate was shot dead in the shoe exercise yard by a guard who used a 9mm rifle. Anthony James was with Preston Tate that deadly day in the shoe yard, and James says that once the guards sent in these two Hispanic inmates, those men entering on the right, he knew they were going to have to fight.
You saw them coming across to you, and it was apparent that there was a fight that was about to begin. Couldn't they have stopped it?
Yeah. The guard would have hollered, "Get down." We would have got down because really nobody wanted to get shot.
During the fight, wooden blocks from a riot gun were fired. Anthony James was hit, and he moved off to the left, and then within seconds, the fatal shot followed from a rifle loaded with an exploding bullet.
It happened so fast. At this point, Tate, he done been shot in the head.
But this Tate homicide was particularly, you see, he's off to the side, and then he gets shot once and he gets off the guy, and then he's away from the action, and another headshot from the Mini 14 comes.
James says that Preston Tate told him that a guard had vowed that he would never leave the shoe alive because he, Tate, had assaulted another staff member.
Was there ever any verbal warning to the two of you or the four of you down there fighting?
Nah.
Do you believe this was a setup?
It had to be.
After the shooting, the videotape shows the guards coming in and hauling out Tate's dead body.
Was Preston Tate murdered?
In my opinion, after reviewing everything that I've reviewed, being told everything I've been told, I think he was murdered, yes.
But in this press release, the day of the Tate shooting, the prison said that Preston Tate was killed because, quote, Tate refused to obey the numerous orders of the yard officer to stop his aggression on another inmate. Afterward, a review board of prison officials issued this report justifying the killing of Tate as a so-called good shot. Quote, the shooting was within department policy.
There was no weapon. It was not a life-threatening situation. There was no serious bodily injury. And to have the shooting review board review all this evidence and clear this shooting is sickening.
Eddie Myers was deputy director of the California Department of Corrections, the man in day-to-day command of California's prisons.
How could it have been a good shoot? Tate was not the aggressor. Tate didn't have a weapon. And it was a good shoot.
Tate was not the intended target of the shot. The officer intended to save Tate's life. It's unfortunate that Tate was hit.
And the shot just went wrong.
He missed.
Who was he supposed to be shooting?
One of the two people that were on top of Tate.
He was supposed to be shooting one of the two Hispanics?
Yes, sir.
How many bad shoots have there been by the review board?
I don't have the exact number. I could get that.
And he did. And it turned out there had been 0 bad shoots. In effect, the Prison Shooting Review Board justified every one of the shootings at Corcoran. But that is by no means what an independent commission set up by the California Senate said late last year. They found that 24 of the 31 serious or fatal shootings at Corcoran were simply unwarranted. But since our first report was broadcast back in 1997,
So a lot of the behavior of law enforcement very similar to the inmates. Now, in 1971, there was something called the Stanford experiment. And before we get into an interesting interview that 60 Minutes did of this guy, Pondexter, I'm going to tell you about the Stanford experiment, because it contextualizes what Pondexter says about how he went from being a normal guy to a bad guy in the environment. Stanford, right here in California, one of the top learning institutes in the world. 1971, a sociology professor, I think it was a sociology professor, he did what was called the prison experiment. He got students and he randomly or pseudo-randomly assigned them to be guards or inmates. It was supposed to run over a weekend. And if you're interested in this type of stuff, you should read the whole thing. Look up the Stanford experiment, and you can read the whole thing. I'm going to give a highlight reel, and some may be a little off, but you should read it if you're interested in prison reform. So the guards arrest and book in, like the Friday night starts with you getting booked in, you're strip searched, clothes are taken, all the things that you do when you're processed into a prison. The professor was there, and as you go from Friday night to Saturday, now they're put into cells, and there's various different rules, and they have to be fed, and this, that, and the third. But man, dude, these are all graduate students in a university. These are not even regular. These are very self-controlled. These are generally the people least likely, you would think, to do something bad. Well, simply by playing in this game, it gets out of control quite quickly. These students assigned to be the guards are getting physically assaultive with their classmates just over the space of a day. And I'm pretty sure they had to end the experiment early. It didn't even last a weekend because it was getting inappropriate, bad things were happening. So humans, we adapt to our environment. So if we're given power, you're made a prison guard, you're told to, hey, and listen, in the prison guard's defense, they're in there with a lot of dangerous people, with antisocial, with people in jail are just nasty and all type of stuff. But nonetheless, you're getting paid. So you've signed up for this, so you should be following the rules for the most part. Once in a while, should the guards have to rat-a-tat-tat on somebody's head off the record? Probably, but rules are meant to be broken to a degree. But you should always be aware that you're, breaking a rule.
we've learned of yet another kind of brutality that California prison guards committed against inmates: rape. Not by the guards, but by other inmates used by the guards to retaliate against prisoners who had gotten out of line.
Did you also say this, quote,
The details of the so-called state-sanctioned rape became clearer during a special hearing on prison violence last summer by the California State Senate.
whether it's correct or not?
A hearing attended by Senator Quentin Cobb.
The Department of Corrections was willing to allow at Corcoran State Prison those conditions to exist in which a prison inmate was encouraged knowingly to commit rape against another inmate and get away with it.
Case in point, Wayne Robertson, a convicted murderer and known sexual predator. He's nicknamed the Booty Bandit. Investigators say he raped at least 15 inmates, many of whom were thrown in his cell for punishment. Meet number 16, Eddie Dillard. He's out of prison now and has started a family, but back in 1993, Dillard was serving time for assault with a deadly weapon when he got into a fight with a female officer. For punishment, the guards at Corcoran State Prison locked Dillard up in a cell with Robertson.
He gets mad and tries to strike me. We start fighting in the cell.
Start fighting in the cell?
Yeah.
You at 120 pounds and he at 220?
It's really not no fight. It's really him tossing me around the cell.
And
he like wrestles me down. He's trying to like pull out my underwear. And you know, I'm like, nah, and I'm hollering for the COs, kicking on the door. Nobody never come and just leave me in there.
So that gentleman there was very brave to go on national television and talk about that happening to him. It's always a mystery of how much of that goes on in prison. I mean, I think less of it goes on than a lot of people think, but it goes on. And any of that type of behavior is pretty horrific. But the idea, and I've read this, saw references to this in different times and heard people say this, is the guards putting you in with the rapist as a punishment. You know, if there's such a thing as cruel and unusual punishment, it's that. I mean, to the guy Robertson, I read this in an article, testified because they had a trial about this. Some of the guards were put on trial. What a sick person. He had the quote in his testimony that he said, I sodomized them all night long.
Over a period of 3 days, Robertson Dillard twice and tried once to force him into...
How can you expect for a person to be subjected to that type of cruelty and then expect them to come out back into society and be productive after being scarred like that?
In fact, the Dillard case might have been ignored if not for two important developments. First, a blistering report published last July in the Los Angeles Times, an article that described the state's investigation into prison violence as a whitewash. Former corrections officer Roscoe Pondexter, nicknamed the Bone Crusher. 2 years after he was forced to resign for excessive violence at Corcoran State, a repentant Pondexter has gone public, admitting just how cruel he had become.
I became insensitive.
So this Mr. Pondexter, he was known as the Bone Crusher. Esquire magazine did a whole article about him. And now we get into even more, well, this guy raped 15 to 25 inmates that they knew about. Robertson, was he from your hood?
And he said?
There's nothing he can do. He didn't do nothing. That was obvious.
Maybe I was in denial, or maybe I didn't really care unless he came out and told me that I am being specifically by him, but I don't think that he came at me and told me specific words. I am being by Robertson.
By ignoring Dillard's pleas, Pondexter maintained what he calls a code of silence.
After the incident happened, all of us sitting down and writing reports together so we could be consistent. I was very much part of that.
Today, Pondexter says he wished he might have done things differently.
If I had to do it back over again, I would have separated the inmates, and I wouldn't care if the Department of Corrections got mad at me, or if I broke the code of silence at that point. What I think that would happen to Eddie Dillard was absolutely wrong.
Dillard is suing several of the correctional staff members, some of whom have been indicted by the California Attorney General. But Dillard is not suing Roscoe Pondexter, whom he has forgiven for the things he did. What happened to Dillard and to those 8 inmates who were shot dead went on because few guards like Roscoe Pondexter have come forward, and it's not difficult to understand why. Consider what happened to the 2 former corrections officers, Steve Riggs and Richard Caruso. Since appearing on 60 Minutes as whistleblowers back in 1997, their lives have been made miserable. They've been made outcasts by many of their former co-workers, and they've received death threats.
They succeeded. We're retired. We can no longer report misconduct by the Department of Corrections. They succeeded.
The moral of the story, therefore, is...
The moral of the story is the Department of Corrections procedures and people in it were rotten. And the system was so rotten as to punish the people who want to be honest and who want to act like they're supposed to in upholding the laws of the state of California. It's a very sorry commentary on the Department of Corrections.
Very sorry commentary on the state of California.
Indeed it is.
Finally, it appears even the Department of Corrections might agree. Their new director called what went on at Corcoran a shooting gallery, and he has vowed to clean up all the violence there.
So, it made it on 60 Minutes. A bunch of the guards were charged in the Gladiator fights, and there was some separate charges for the graping stuff with the inmate, that horrible monster Robertson. Is he from your hood? I want to know. Was he in your gang? No police were found guilty of anything. How about that? So there was a federal trial of the guards, the Corcoran 8, they called them, that went on, or the whatever number, that went on trial for the Gladiator fights and the illegal killings. It was federal, but they were smart. They picked a jury, which is their right as defendants. And in that San Joaquin Valley where Corcoran is at, again, there was, at the time of the trial, 10,000 jobs were associated with California prisons just in that region, which is a rural farming region. So that's where all the illegal migrant farm workers and legal, different people working in the farms. So other than the farm workers, really all the good jobs were in the prisons. And the California Prison Guard Union is considered, they do rankings, I think it was ranked one time second most powerful union in the country, behind maybe some teachers union. Very powerful union. They're the ones who got the third strikes law kind of passed. Well, they put money into it so there could be more inmates, so they get more jobs. You know what the average salary of a California prison guard, for which you only have to have a high school diploma, average is $90,000 a year. And 1 out of 10 are making 170 or more. You get promoted, you get overtime. Now, I'm not one of those people that abolish the police. There's people that need to be in prison. Just from the little bit of jail I've had, like, I wouldn't want to be a guard and all that. So they deserve a certain amount of leeway, but of course, just totally ridiculous. So anyways, they picked a jury in the federal court, and because the jury pool was drawn from this area where most of the good jobs are, at least of the jury eligible people, are someone's connected to a prison guard or something, found them all not guilty of anything. They got no convictions, if I remember correctly, like not even minor stuff. The whistleblowers were harassed, got death threats, had to move, start new careers, the whistleblower guards. There was a few small amounts of money, or some hundreds of thousands paid out to some of the inmates' families. Trivial. And even in the Robertson grape, the guy Robertson that was graping, and you had the one guy that was brave enough to go on 60 Minutes and talk about it. No convictions of any guards. So, a total no punishment. So this stuff made 60 Minutes. The national news, written up in Esquire. You think, hey, we're going to get the story out to the biggest media there is, and there was still no justice. And that's why, just a few months ago, you have the same thing going on, but this time it's with children. I'm sure it's been going on all along. They just caught them. Having children fight each other. And California ain't the only place it happens. Anyone I knew in juvenile in Detroit, it's criminal justice system is there's a reason there's such a high recidivism rate, and it ain't just because the people coming out of jail ain't shit. I mean, some of them ain't, but a lot of them have been damaged inside. It's very traumatizing. I mean, even to be in there and just be hungry and you can't get something to eat and no one cares will alter your whole, understanding of life. Just that. You don't even have to have anything, super wild happen to you. Just being locked up for a couple weeks is actually, you know, it's a pretty serious psychological event. So check on your, what saves people, you know, check on your family in prison. Like, for real. Like, if something's going on, you ain't hearing from them, call the jail. It's like anywhere. Don't talk crazy to the warden now, but it's like anything else. When someone knows there's at least someone in the normal world that cares about you to some extent, they're probably a little less apt to do things to you. And again, listen, guards get assaulted, they get urine and feces thrown on them. I get it. They want to do stuff to these guys. But roughing a prisoner up is a lot different than staging fights, betting on them, and then ending them by killing somebody. And throwing someone, and again, that little guy messed with a female guard. Y'all want to take him in a cell and break a couple ribs? I mean, that ain't right, but I get it. But to have somebody be raped by such a sicko who himself in the testimony said, yeah, I ran up in him all night. He said that on the stand. I sodomized him all night. So prison, you know, these guys want to talk about all this, you know, rah-rah and gangs and this and how they run this and that. Well, you see none of these guys in California talk about standing up to the guards. Because the guards got them at each other's throats. They're the puppets of the guards, weak-minded. And I'd like to see some California prison stories about doing something to the guards. And I know it's easier said than done. I'm sitting in a free world. I ain't telling nobody to do nothing. I'm just saying, where are those stories? Or do they keep those buried, or people don't want to hear them? I don't know. But a dark insight into the criminal justice system here in California, but it goes on everywhere. And they didn't convict anybody at all, despite all that evidence back with the Corcoran thing in 2000. And now you see it. They're doing it with the juveniles. Al Prophet American.